Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepoint Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepoint helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
So we hear lots of talk about repatriation, or the concept of moving workloads from the public cloud back to bare metal or customer gear in a colo. The result of that is, of course, a hybrid cloud. Perhaps we don't talk enough about why we're repatriating. It's not just that certain workloads don't work technically or financially in the cloud. It's that we didn't consider whether they should have been moved there in the first place. Think back. Board level edicts came down about half a decade ago to move to the cloud. And of course we did. Today, at least for a portion of our workloads, we're moving back. So now that AI is all the rage and everyone is chasing automation and efficiency, are we at risk of providing the answer without understanding the question yet again? Are we doomed to repeat history, or have we learned to take a pause and assess our work before we throw technology at it? Will the AI companies sell their products differently than their cloud ancestors and work with customers to understand use cases before signing them up? Brian Thomas is the manager of segment marketing and digital strategy for Equinix, and he's my guest on this episode. We ponder these questions and more, as well as talk about how the AI revolution is affecting Equinix and their plans to be a carbon responsible player in the data center market. And if you enjoy the questions that we ponder here on The Bridge, be sure to give us a favorite, a like, or a comment on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. But here we go. Are we doomed to repeat our cloud history with AI? Who knows? Maybe we'll find an answer. Check out my conversation with Brian Thomas, fellow Philadelphian and LaSalle grad, here on this episode of The Bridge. Well, hi, and welcome to The Bridge. This is an episode that we'll be dropping somewhere around the holidays. So whether it's pre or post, happy holidays to our loyal fans out there listening to this podcast. Super excited to have Brian Thomas from Equinix on the phone with us today. On the phone, listen to me, I'm so old school. On the pod with us today. Brian Thomas officially is the senior manager of segment marketing digital strategy for Equinix. I'm going to give him the opportunity to tell us just what the hell that means in a moment. But Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. Happy holidays.
Absolutely. We at Bridgepoint have had a banner year with our friends, with our partners at Equinix. So it's great to be able to count the cost on that, if you will. I'm going through our business planning for next year and seeing the stack ranking. Pretty good year between the two companies. Interesting time to have this conversation. But as our listeners know, I always like to start with people. This is a people business. So Brian, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Based in Philadelphia, married, have a son who lives out on the West Coast getting his PhD. Been with Equinix for about a year, but managed Equinix globally for another partner for about 5 years prior. I own the channel for joint value prop, go to market, key digital messaging, I guess we'll say. Prior to that, worked in sales for maybe, good Lord, 30 years, sales leadership, channel management, just dated myself there. Tech-wise, pretty much the gamut, not just digital infrastructure, of course, but public and private MEC, so that whole edge computing area, IoT, I did a lot of work there. And from a services perspective, managed services, outsourcing, so kind of spread pretty thin, I guess a mile wide and an inch deep on a lot of different things.
Fantastic. And I want to keep on that for a minute, but I have to throw something out there. I always prep with LinkedIn. We went to the same university. We were
Really?
both LaSalle grads.
No way.
I knew you were Philly, but I somehow that didn't come up in our pre-call. So explorers are never lost. Clearly, here
or
we are
maybe
together
so.
on the pod. Fantastic. What did you study at LaSalle?
Marketing and psychology. I have a dual degree in that. So nowhere
Gotcha.
near IT, but sort of fell into that out of
Yeah.
school. I worked for a consultant who kind of took me under his wing, a mentor to me, and kind of taught me the ropes a bit. But I kind of fell into IT, frankly. How about yourself?
I think a lot of people, that's a pretty good, I mean, I fell into IT. For me, it's funny. I studied, I was in the radio, television, and film concentration in the comm school at LaSalle when I was there. And I got out and I ended up working for an agency, recruited straight into an agency, and I was doing that work. And I'm in it for a year, and this web thing was starting to happen. And they were like, does anybody know how to build a web page around here? Because nobody knew who to go to for that, right?
Right.
So next thing you know, I'm building web pages. And then I don't know, 6 months later, I'm consulting for Lockheed Martin. You know what I mean? Like, how did this happen? I have no idea. Next thing you know, I'm building web pages for the telco that I went to work for. Because honestly, nobody knew do you go to your ISP to get your web page done, or your marketing company?
Right.
Like, yes, I guess. Right. And then the rest is history. Here we are. For me, I don't know that our dates, Brian, are all that different, because that's 25 years ago for me. So
Yeah, I went 86 to 90. 86 to 90.
Okay. Well, I got there at 91. So we literally just missed each other there. Did you live on campus?
Commuted for 2 years and lived on campus for 2.
Which
had to
hall
sort of
did you live in
work
on
to
campus?
pay for it. Oh God, it was right by Heyman, right by
Yeah. Okay. No, I know that one.
That building right there, right by Heyman Hall, or the old Heyman Hall. I don't even know what it is now. I'm not
right across the
I don't
street.
I don't necessarily follow everything around the school.
Yeah, it's been a big change. All right. Well, enough reminiscing on that. The listeners are like, I don't know anything about Philadelphia or LaSalle,
Right.
so get on with it. Brian, you talked about a lot, and you said a lake, and I love that phrase, kind of a mile wide, inch deep. But the reality of it is, you've got a superpower. You're in your role for a reason. What's your personal superpower, you think, in tech?
Well, I don't know if I call it super, but it's being that I'm across so many different technologies through the years. Yeah. It's about taking that tech speak that we hear every day, acronym hell, that we go back and forth with all the time, but taking that technical speak and making it relevant to a customer. So business outcome driven, relevant to that vertical, relevant to what matters to them. So taking the technical and making it use case driven, how it can drive business for them specifically, aligning to their outcomes and those sort of things. And I think that's
totally,
that's something that's lost a lot, frankly, as too many meetings we walk into and it becomes, as I said, acronym hell, tech speak, heavy duty architecture, propellers going. And it's all that has to align to an outcome for a customer. So that's an area that I sort of focus on in meetings and making sure we're keeping it business relevant always.
Perfect. And we had DR on the show last year. He's exceptional at that as well. I assume you guys work together over there.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And I handle the channel. He handles the Americas. I'm channel specific.
Got it. Yeah. Great guy. We had an awesome talk, and it was a really great episode. We'll get back to that in a minute, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to make the complicated more simple here. We do this always, and certainly our listeners are familiar with Equinix, but can you just give us the message, top level? We're in an elevator together for those who might not know.
Yeah, sure. We'll take it from who we are and then kind of what it means, I guess. Yeah. So from a who we are perspective, world leader in digital infrastructure, 250 plus globally interconnected data centers. They're located in geographic and business hubs around the world. Clients can deploy inside of Equinix, we call them IBXs, they're data centers essentially. They can deploy physically or virtually, so a footprint like a cabinet or a cage, or virtually with network function virtualization as a service. We call that network edge. Or bare metal as a service, which is a single tenant stack of compute. We call that Equinix metal. So once customers are deployed inside of Equinix, they have access to our fabric. And that fabric is essentially companies that have chosen to build and grow their presence inside of our platform. So they basically establish a presence inside those 250 plus interconnected data centers. We call that the Equinix fabric. It's 3,000 cloud providers at this point, about 2,000 network service providers. And this all just frankly enables the edge. It allows them customers to interconnect securely, privately, low latency, high performance, all that to their unique suppliers, tech alliances, co-innovation partners, SaaS providers, et cetera. So it really enables the edge. So what that all means to a customer really is we can help them digitally transform. We can help them establish a distributed digital core, taking what was maybe centralized and making it more distributed in close proximity to customers, employees, users in general. Once that distributed digital core is established, it's who do we interconnect with? We interconnect with those SaaS providers that are very specific to that customer, those tech alliances, those co-innovation partners. So it allows for that interconnection. And all that does is just enable the digital edge. All the use cases that are out there across AI and hybrid cloud that we hear every day, anywhere in the world, and delivering that most optimal user experience, because all those workloads are super close to the end consumer of that particular application or workload. So that's essentially what we do and what it means to customers. We enable that edge for all these things that customers try to do, any vertical, anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Let me just walk that back for the maybe the non-IT buyer for 1 second.
Sure.
And I love this conversation about digital cores, right? Because in reality, we were headed this way anyway, and we were already starting to think about edge technology. But the reality of it is, then the pandemic happened, and the stricture of the core office sort of broke down, right?
The edge moved. The edge moved.
The edge moved, but the use case became all that more pertinent, right? So in a lot of ways, I'm oversimplifying here.
Sure.
The key is the data center in the office, was always a question of whether they belong there or not. But now that we're not doing shiny buildings so much anymore, or at least we're doing shiny buildings in connection to a work from home. Everybody's in some kind of hybrid these days, even businesses who have the big shiny buildings. The reality of it is the core company infrastructure has got to go someplace else. It doesn't make sense to be in the basement or the on-site data center. It's there. But what's even more important is this whole edge concept that, like, if that's your digital core, then you need proximity to all of these other companies with whom you choose to do business. Microsoft Office 365 is a good example, Salesforce.com. And then there's a million other kind of fringe applications, but I'm using the germane ones. Did I do a good job of taking that even one step down at that point?
You did.
Is that
Absolutely.
the way you see it?
Yeah, there's more locations, more devices, more data, and more expectations at the edge. So with that expectation, you have to be able to deliver that to your end users, hence the proximity and the application of them being closer, so that it's a better user experience. So as the users are more distributed and the devices become more and more and more, that becomes increasingly difficult for companies to manage and deal with. So that's where we come in.
Yeah.
And Bridgepoint together with us.
Yeah, of course. Maybe an extreme question, but it's a fun one. I'm just going to go there just as a sidebar on this particular topic. I'm sure you talk to customers all the time. Do we still talk, when you're like sizing a business, you're just getting in and learning something about them. Do we still even talk about kind of like, how many office locations do you have anymore? Has the person replaced the office in like the count of the size of a business when you talk to them today?
Well, it's more of a mix. I think it always historically it was, these are my 5 locations and the data center's in the basement and everything's hairpinning through this centralized location out to whichever workload. Maybe it's a direct connection to AWS, and we're accessing all our SaaS applications through this NSP. And we have a private line, going old school, a private line to a
frame relay,
partner.
right? You can connect that one, wire that up.
X.25, showing my age there, definitely.
Right, exactly.
So that was the dialogue years ago. And then it really sort of morphed into kind of a mix of those users from home, those smaller offices, along with still some centralized locations, especially like retail. You have distribution centers along with the retail locations, home users, etc. So there's a mix now. So the office location, as we know, it hasn't gone away. It's just now it's the weighting, we'll say, is a bit different than what it used to be. So frankly, it's
I was just saying that, or said differently. I say this to IT people all the time, like, you're basically building 2 networks, 100% remote one and 100% in the office one, because you don't know where they're going to be. And
then blending them together.
And then blending them together.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. Super interesting. So when DR and I talked last year, we, some of the same themes, right? I mean, I think the messaging is now maybe a year removed, right, around kind of the digital core and the edge has morphed, let's say, or matured a little bit. But we spoke quite a bit about the pandemic. We talked a lot about the cloud hangover. You guys at the time were repatriating a lot of public cloud back into, bare metal or private cloud, or perhaps even colo. Let me dust off the gear that's still sitting in the warehouse kind of thing. Right. And then, just the general topic of digital transformation and, how that looked in 23. I'm assuming those themes are still there. And if you want to touch on any of them, great. But I mean, what else is affecting, your market and roadmap for 24? How are you guys thinking about this coming year?
Yeah, well, repatriation is that's actually gotten accelerated. That seems to be seen even more of a topic than it was a year ago. So we see that with so many customers now. Like, I think it was a lesser percentage a year ago. They're still assessing their decisions from the past for cost and control. So that's still happening. Not as impactful maybe as the sexy things you're hearing now. AI, of course, is you can't go a day without hearing the term AI. And that's my mother hears AI every day. So it's like that's all they're talking about. So that's really AI is a true driver. That's changing the dependencies that customers have from an ecosystem, from a network perspective. I think it's IDC. I was reading something. IDC said core AI IT spend is going to exceed $300 billion by 2025, just to update infrastructure to support AI applications. So they got to have strategies. They got to they're assessing their DI, their digital infrastructure, or rather, to see if it supports the data ingestion, the training and inference, all the local decision points. And they're seeing that their infrastructure cannot support that. And it scares the hell out of them, frankly, because all they're hearing about is AI, and they're seeing their infrastructure can't support it. So a lot of questions about that. IoT, still hearing about that, because now it's like connected everything. I just bought a home, and we got our refrigerator, and it's connected. It can see when I need milk. Like, it's ridiculous. So the world is connected, connected buildings, connected cities, factories. It is just your home is fully connected now. So that's creating so much data that has to be acted upon. So AI and IoT are driving big data and analytics. What am I going to do with all that data? How am I going to analyze it? How am I going to get those actionable insights to the edge to make them real time, near real time, and from an AI perspective, serious real time, like now.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, we've been talking about getting the data in a spot to do BI for some time, but I mean, the AI's got to be informed. I mean, that's the next phase of this thing. Right. We'll unpack that in a minute. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut your answer off.
No worries. And that's changing like our alliances and our partnerships that we have. The partnerships of yesterday, they work in the AI space, but we need those newer partners, the NVIDIAs, the Intels, the AMDs, and then any partner who can enable the use cases, the AI, so data scientists and everything that goes along with that, writing that code and studying the structured and unstructured data and all that, be able to do that. So we want to work with partners. Digital infrastructure we enable that, Equinix does, but we're not delivering the full use case, it's bringing AI truly to bear. So we need the right partners that we can marry with and bring that to the market. So that's a lot of work we're doing now. So that's impacting just as we say, it impacts network and ecosystem dependencies for the customer. It also impacts us as well, frankly. So those are three real key areas that we're seeing as drivers.
So that I was mentally jotting down the 15 things I wanted to ask you in the middle of that answer. So I apologize for jumping in the middle. It's a great answer.
No worries.
Let me unpack just a couple of things on that, because we started on the repatriation topic and then we got into AI, and I want to spend some time on AI, but let me just harken back to repatriation for 1 minute, because, you mentioned that all of the spend that's going to go into digital infrastructure to support AI. And yet, if you talk to the average CEO, they don't even understand the use cases yet.
No.
Right. So I'm hearkening that a little bit to where we are currently on repatriation, right? Because let's be honest, there were like these board level edicts, like get to the cloud.
Cloud first.
Yeah. And out of fairness, the board didn't even know in a lot of ways, what the hell they were asking for. Right.
The impact.
So now we're in this, hybrid stance. We're hybrid with where our employees are. We're now comfortable with hybrid cloud, right? Like, let's just be honest. Like, there's workloads that you just shouldn't pay for by the drip. Like, it is what it is, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that hybrid term is just become kind of normal with where we are. But I'm trying to make that equation because I wonder, you know, we sort of cloudized everything 6, 7, 8 years ago. Do you think there's a little bit of that going on in AI right now? I mean, I know the tech is moving fast, but I still feel like businesses are like, this sounds great. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with it in my business, but it sounds awesome. Like, you think that's occurring?
Yeah, I do actually. They're reading about all the different use cases that can apply, you know, to their world, whether it be, you know, consumer experience or understanding your customer better and be able to be more reactive to them, to drive revenue, to push different solutions or different products, those sort of things. So AI is a big driver in that space, and so customers are reading all about the different use cases, but they have no idea how to move that forward. Now, different than cloud, the move to cloud is easier than let's deploy AI. Let's do, you know, applied AI or generative AI.
Yeah, right.
You know, so what am I doing? So what we're finding is, and I have some family members that are actually working the space. So I've asked them a question. Hey, are you seeing more? Are you having more digital, like AI strategy discussions, or are you having more AI deployments? Like, where are you at in your discussions with AI? And they said it's dominantly strategy discussions right now. Because I think maybe they learned a little bit from their decisions of how hasty they were, how quick they moved everything to the cloud. They're moving all. This is fantastic without the ramifications of cost and control. Because it was easy. That was an easy thing. Hey, put all the workloads, migrate the app. No, I don't want to oversimplify. That's not easy, but a hell of a lot easier than deploying a whole AI solution. So I think it has them looking at strategy more now than maybe they did in the past, because there was, I hate the term easy button, but it applies as sending things to the cloud as opposed to an AI, you know, enabling an AI use case. So I think they're discussing more strategy now, and open to more strategy and asking for help more than they did just moving things to the cloud. So maybe they learned something along the way.
Yeah, you know what?
That's my
I hadn't
perspective.
even thought of it that way. You know, I won't get into the detail of the company or anything along those lines. I have a close family member, let's just say, who works for an AI company.
Okay.
And you know, the company does something that's interesting to us. I won't get into the detail on this, but when I engaged with them from a selling perspective, their basic approach was, you know, let's suss out your use case and we'll demo it. Like, they wanted to do that before they even gave me pricing. And it felt like a little bit backwards. And then and having this conversation, I'm like, you know, that's kind of exactly it. Like, it's particularly when it says subscription, you know, it's going to consume subscription, or in your case, consume infrastructure. You know what I mean? And you're already in there before you're sussing the use case out. They're basically approaching their sales process as an AI services company that has a solution that fits a specific need, where they're basically saying, like, you got to best fit yourself to this thing we're doing before we're going to the next stage with you. Like, our thing does a thing and you're going to try it. And, you know, we'll put some sales effort in up front, because it's a whole hell of a lot of effort probably than recovering on the back end when you're paying for something you're not using, or you want to leave, or you're dissatisfied, or what have you. It's a really interesting approach to selling that. Do you think we'll see more of that maybe because of this whole cloud hangover?
The lab work being done in advance to see what it looks like, how it works. And I think a lot of the SIs, when they're having AI conversations, are having that as one of their first steps, is let's put this in the lab, see how it works. And that's part of the, you know, the test bed, the sandbox, we'll say, for it. And I think even the dominant players in the space are creating sandbox environments that are going to let people play in there using some of the high performance computing and see that, okay, here's how this would look. Then it becomes, we latch onto that, we complement that by saying, okay, do you want to house that high performance computing in your basement and deal with cooling and power consumption, all that? So we latch onto that as, okay, this use case, you saw it, how it was enabled. It was super cool. Wow, it's fantastic. It's going to make a huge difference in our business. All right. Now, if you want to put that into deployment, really put that into production, here's what you're going to consume from a space, from a power and all that. And then, so we want to complement that, work with that, and then bring it to life together.
Brian, can you take a minute on, and we've covered this on other episodes, but I want to make sure that people don't have to go back to them. can you just take a minute? Let's be nerdy for a second on just, on the physical space portion of what it is that you do, right? You guys are going to be the digital infrastructure for where these applications live. Others are providing the applications. But how is AI? And, you mentioned like the partnerships with NVIDIA and, I'm just sharing that so that you know where I'm going with this. Like what's changing in your kind of core data center and infrastructure business as it relates to being able to support these applications?
Yeah, it is enabling the consumption of power. So I have to probably put a foundational frame of reference.
Yeah, go for it.
So historically, a cabinet inside of one of our IBXs, one of our data centers, and it's a stack of gear, and it's consumed maybe 5 kVA, so kilowatts, a unit of measurement, power unit. With the high performance computing stacks that are now available, if you deploy them into a cabinet, it could be upwards near 30, 40 kVA. So exponentially greater than what was consumed by your standard run of the mill application. So that changes the way that we are, we're deploying the consumption of power within our own data centers. So it's remodeling that a bit to enable this significant amount of very concentrated
cooling.
All of
that has to change.
And then you have the sustainability piece of it. So, that's part of our conversation with customers as well is, okay, so from a sustainability footprint, your carbon footprint, whatever you're committing to the street as far as your sustainability efforts and the reduction of your emissions, et cetera, our discussions about how we are, 98% renewable energy now globally and going to be 100% by 2030. That's our commitment. So because we're using all renewables, we can say, hey, we're not only taking over this footprint for you and providing the power that it's going to require and the cooling, et cetera, to make sure that it's going to function properly, but then we're going to have our sustainability efforts are going to allow you to maybe reach your commitments, despite the fact that you are deploying this significant power hog of an application. So that's kind of the messaging we have, and we're reworking the data centers in order to handle those types of footprints.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm going to clarify something that you said just for the listeners, and I want to come back to the sustainability thing for a minute. And to be clear, people are like, "Oh, well, then why AI? Like, it's an app, and why is it consuming so much power?" If you just think about it logically, I won't go technically because there's GPUs versus CPUs, and that's the NVIDIA thing. Let's just stay off that for a minute. Just logically, for the end user to think about, like when you're engaging with an application, it's most times it's working when you're asking it to do something. Right. So I use it and then I'm not using it, and I use it and I'm not using it. And oftentimes that's just sort of a bi-directional, instance-based moment where processors are being used and therefore power is being used and fans are cooling, et cetera. In an AI model, the strength in being able to get a large language model that knows something is that it's working constantly on your data to make connections between it. So even if we weren't addressing it with different hardware, which we're doing now because we need the processors to be more efficient and things of that nature, the reality of it, just on a regular old server, trying to run these algorithms, the machine would be working all of the time instead of when you're asking it to do something. I mean, that's just the base level of measure why this is different. That's fair, right, Brian? Just a simple explanation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. The second thing I wanted to just pack in on is I wanted to get back to the sustainability thing because you talked about, I was going to ask you this question and then you said global, which somewhat indicated where we were going on this. Are you finding that the sustainability and more importantly, the specific carbon footprint question is really still a nice to have in the US, where obviously it's in some areas of the world, Europe in particular, it's really regulatory, right? Yep. Still a nice to have in the US. Being honest about our gas guzzling U.S. culture. Let's just, it is what it is, right?
You're still drinking the dinosaur, filling up your gas and your tank every day. It's a nice to have if it fits into the context of the deal. If it's if oh, we get sustainability efforts as well, that aligns also. So we could check a box there. But it's rare that in the business criteria that are that everybody's being put up against, that sustainability is top of that.
Yeah.
It's I have to do this sustainably as much as possible as well. So I think in the order of things that are assessed, maybe that's number 5. It might move up to 4 or 3 in the next couple years. But is it ever going to be 1? Like, this is on average.
Well, I mean,
some companies
maybe it becomes 1 if the
committed.
government gets involved, but the reality of it is it's going to become 2 or 3 when buyers in the U.S. care more about it, right?
Yes.
Than they do today.
Yep.
And then from your perspective, it's like, if it's good marketing, great, but I'm not going to necessarily use it I'm not going to spend twice as much. You know what I mean? It's kind of the model. In Europe, just question, because we do have listeners, CIOs, CEOs are a lot of the listeners of this podcast who have European operations, and they do have to deal with this for real. Are you guys are you kind of engaging in that carbon credit economy over there as you're doing these deals? Like, are you guys are sort of doing the hard work and helping them sort of work through that a little bit?
Yeah, we have some folks who can really dig in with them. And we do provide some reporting that gives them true benchmarks and documentation on the consumption and those sort of things. Yeah. It's kind of difficult in providing specific consumption within a very large data center of a specific cabinet and the corresponding renewable energy and how that is. So it's a very difficult analysis to put together. So, but we help them understanding the impact of sustainability on their particular space as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Complicated and expensive, but easy when it's in your building, right? You put it in yours, like they have their consumption, but you have your generation and you have your cool, and those are like germane stats you've got to add to, which makes some sense.
And that's specifically, just one last point, that's specifically difficult when it's a virtual footprint, because that's a shared resource.
Yeah. How do you?
Yeah.
And you might be eating it more today than you were yesterday, and somebody else is eating some of it. So completely get it. Just understanding that and being able to be willing to engage in that conversation is the feather in your cap in my mind, right? Because it's coming here. It's just going to be slower. You know what I mean? Like you said, we're the big hairy gas guzzlers. From a government perspective.
We have a real commitment to sustainability, like the whole ESG, policies and such. We're very much aligned to that.
Well, we just drew a straight line from COVID to offices collapsing to AI to cloud repatriation to IoT through big data and into edge enablement. So we covered a lot of territory in a really short period of time. Is there anything else that's hot on your mind right now that maybe we missed in that conversation that you want to make sure that the listeners get out as to, like, kind of what's keeping Brian up at night, or what you're thinking about from a messaging and marketing perspective as you think about how to talk about these concepts? Yeah,
I think, all these disruptions, all these disruptors that are out there today, we would at Equinix say you need to have a platform partner that you work with on these things.
Yeah.
So that's been our messaging for a couple of years, but we're like doubling down on that. Because if you think about traditional co-location providers who have a decent footprint, some light cloud interconnection, we'll say, those architectures were built for yesterday's problems, we'll say. Yeah. They weren't built to handle the disruptors of today. So those they just weren't built to do it. So it's like trying to stream Netflix on an old VCR. It just wasn't meant to do it. So you need to have the ecosystem density, the flexibility of physical or virtual, and that ecosystem, the scalability and the nimbleness to interconnect when on demand as required, quick interconnection, self-service models. You got to have all that as a platform to handle today's disruptors, because that just requires it. So we're having our discussion with customers is more about their strategies. You need a partner today tactically, but they have to have a partner that also aligns strategically for tomorrow. Yeah. Because customers are spending all this money to deploy footprints and such. And then in a year, they're saying, wow, they can't do A, B, and C. And then it becomes a migration and a rip out and a move, and time, energy, resources have to be spent to redo that. So you got to make decisions for today, and also with a view on what your outcomes are 12, 24, 36 months out. And clients that we work with, sometimes they don't have that view, and we try to have that strategic discussion with them. So that's a takeaway that I try to always instill with clients.
It just can't be a real estate conversation anymore.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, especially, and here's an extreme example, but when somebody says, well, what do you really mean by that? I'm always like, well, listen, most data center facilities were built in old manufacturing in the 90s, right? Like big old concrete behemoth built. You just can't cool them the way today's applications are needed to, if that's the majority of your footprint. Like the whole way we do this has changed. And to your point, like once you move the core of your business someplace else, all of that interconnection and the way you think about it and the way you move workloads and who else is there and, all that kind of stuff becomes eminently important. The way we're investing in our networks has completely changed. It used to be all about the network, and now it's really about where your data is. And then the network is a subsequent conversation, right? In a lot of ways.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a client last week, in fact, and I won't use her name. But so we walked around the data center, took them on a data center tour. And we came back into the executive briefing room. And I said, okay, so you saw the blinking lights and the conduit and the mesh around the cage. That's fantastic. You're going to see that with every one that you talk to. Okay, but let's raise this discussion up a level. What are you trying to do over the next 5 years? Yeah. And we had that dialogue for them for the next hour and a half. And then they were like, wow, we didn't talk about our footprint at all. I'm like, all right, well, let's talk about that. Let's get that now. And at the end of the meeting, they said, we didn't have this conversation with the other 6 people we spoke to. Yeah. And now we're moving forward with them because they saw the value in the platform, the value in the strategy, and aligned to what they're going to do in the future as well as today. So that's an important part.
Yeah. Begin with the end in mind, Brian.
Yeah.
Or, as we said in college, explorers are never lost, ultimately. All right. So we went, as I expected, by the way, in our pre-call, longer than I was expecting to go with this conversation. So we're going to have the fun conversation, but we're going to do it rapid fire style. So we'll keep these quick. I have 3 questions for you. We'll start light and then we'll get fun. First one, there's probably something on your end table that you're reading. What is it? And would you recommend it to our listeners?
I've got a couple books. I read everything through my Kindle. So The Gift of Influence, which is a business book I'm reading, which is about how to interact with people, both business and personal. So it's just a good business read of just how to impactful relationships. Okay. And then I read a ton of books. I'm always reading a book. So right now I'm reading Matthew Fitzsimmons, which is a book on cloning. It's fiction, and it's just super interesting. He's a great writer. I read him a lot. Got it. Are you reading any books where they're the AI is basically eating humans to power itself, basically? Skynet's taking over right now. The whole time we were talking about not having enough power for AI, the Matrix just keeps coming to mind. I'm like, eventually they're going to realize we're a great power source. But we'll get there. I can't read that kind of stuff. It would just change my view of what I do today. Those who know me know I am all about the dystopian future movies and books. Like you can give me those all day long. I do like those as well. All right. So speaking of dystopian futures, what a great segue. I wasn't even prepared for it. That's assuming that dystopian future comes and there's only one app working on your mobile phone at that point. What's the one app you get to choose? Sure. Well, like zombie apocalypse, dystopian future. Well, you can choose your end of the world, but which app? Yeah, I don't want to have to leave the house, so I'm going to go Instacart. Like, bring me my food, so I don't have to go out and leave my house and deal with the zombies and stuff. Let somebody else risk their brain get eaten. I like it. That's right. Yeah, Instacart. Brian, that doesn't make you selfish at all. It's good, man. It's good. A man's got to eat. All right. Isn't the dystopian future all about selfishness? I mean, it totally is. You're right. You got that, man. I love it. All right, last one. Here we go. I just need, and this one's, this kind of harkens back to our business conversation. Give me a shameless prediction of something in the next 12 to 18 months. It can be tech, but it could be politics, sports, music, whatever you want. I'm going to go off. I'm going to nerd out on this a little bit. So my son, I know that my son's getting his PhD. So bear with me. I need 1 minute. Yeah, my son's getting his PhD, but I didn't tell you what it was in. He's getting his PhD in astrobiology and planetary studies. Okay. So the James Webb Space Telescope went up about, a year and a half ago, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that is going out farther and getting data from farther out in the universe than we've ever had before. So it's studying the first data is going to come back from a cluster called TRAPPIST-1. It's a seven planet cluster. And we're going to get data back from that probably in about a year, maybe 2 years. And my prediction is that data is going to massively change our view of the universe and our place in it, because it's going to come back with some really cool data. By the way, the TRAPPIST-1, that cluster, has already been determined by scientists to have similar characteristics to Earth.
There's multiple planets in the Goldilocks zone in that territory. I'm a little bit of a geek on that. In my Apple news feed, I follow the James Webb, so I get all the stories every week. Totally. I think the thing about that is the most exciting, and then for nerds like us, also at the same sense, the most disheartening thought about all of this is that we will ultimately discover that there's probably almost, if you follow Hawking's math on it, like it's almost statistically impossible that there's not another us, just based on the number of options and the number of things that had to go right for us to become a carbon-based life form on a planet like this. But this carbon-based life form is physically impossible. It's physically impossible for us to ever see them or get to them in our lifetime.
Well,
unless
maybe
we
they
figure
come
out
to
some
us.
other way of traveling, right?
Yeah, it's Independence Day. They're going to come to us or something.
Yeah,
but
the universe is expanding way
Yes.
faster than our science is to be able to get there.
Yeah, they're going to find something. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be something that changes our just a massive shift in how we view the world.
When that data comes back, we're getting you back on the podcast, and we're just going to geek out on that.
Cool. I'll bring my son. He's 25. This is what he does for his living. So
we'll do that. I'm sure I'm sure my business partners are going to be like, why are we running episodes of The Bridge talking about the telescope? Because I'm a geek and I want to know. Hey, Brian, this was as fun as I expected it to be after our pre-call. So I really appreciate the time. Always like meeting somebody from the hood, which is awesome also. So pleasure there. And we're really looking forward to, perhaps seeing you again on the show. If somebody wants to find out a little bit more about Equinix, or, maybe follow you on the stuff that you're working on, what should they do?
Sure. www.equinix.com, EQUINIX, everybody.com. Reach out to me, email brithomas@equinix.com. And follow me on LinkedIn, reach out to me, connect. So I thank you so much for having me today. This was a lot of fun, Scott.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, obviously, Bridgepoint's partnership with Equinix, and continued success for you and the firm.
Here we are heading into the new year. So I'll toast to that. Thanks for being on the bridge today. And thank all of you for listening. We really do appreciate your time. And we hope to catch you soon on another episode of The Bridge. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.